All right, so now let's turn off this main nebula and go ahead and just create a sphere by control clicking on the sphere. And then from that sphere object, let's just call this fluid emitter. Change that color to red because I like to make my emitters red. And then let's dive down inside. And then now first thing from this sphere, let's throw down a subdivide. All right, just throw that up to a value of 3. Take a look at that, just so smooth it out. And then now I'm going to throw down a transform because I just want to move this guy over just a little bit to where I want him to be. So go ahead and pump those values in. And then I want to uniform scale this guy down to 0.15 because I want him to be a little smaller. All right, and then let's go up a level, and then now I want to make a collision object just underneath this guy, because sometimes I think it can be interesting and fun to throw down a collision object for that particle fluid, and then as that fluid falls down, giving it that collision, it can take on some more interesting shapes. It's the thing with these nebulas is they're very interesting in the way that they're shaped and formed. And there are many different ways to deform your meshes and deform your particles. In addition to the point vops we've already been doing with the noises, you can also use things like collision objects in conjunction with your noises. So that's what we're going to do here. So I can throw down another sphere. And then this guy, we're going to call him P-Fluid Collider. And then let's change the color, change that to orange. And then we can dive down inside. Same thing as before. Let's throw down a subdivide. Throw that to 3. And then now after the subdivide, I want to throw down a mountain. Oops. Handy dandy mountain, everybody's favorite. And then now this guy, I'm gonna, just change a couple parameters just to give me sort of an interesting shape. I'm going to change this to sparse convolution. And then for my luminosity, I settled in at 144, roughness 0.664. And then I just moved the offset around a touch until I came up with a shape that I thought was pretty interesting. There we go. And so what's going to happen here is our fluid is going to fall and it's going to kind of accumulate in this area, but then it's also going to pour. So we're going to get a good little bit of viscosity turned on in here so that it will accumulate and then do a nice little pour. And that's going to give us some interesting shapes. So let's go ahead and now select our particle fluid emitter, go up to our particle fluids, emit particle fluid, select the object, hit enter. Give that a second to think. Okay, cool. There we are. Now, let's get these guys stacked up. And just go ahead and delete that particle fluid interior because we don't need it. And then within the particle fluid, we don't need any of this stuff. We just want this import particle node. Because what we're going to do is we're going to drive our simulation through here. And we're going to need ultimately a file cache node. And we're going to call this dense. Connect the two. All right. And then go ahead and make this a collision object. Hit L to lay everything out. Okay. And then, as always, collisions, volume collisions, and if we want to throw on our collision guide, we can see here, if we go back to frame 1 and decrease these values a little bit, we'll get a nice, interesting shape. Hide other objects, yeah. So you can see that our collision object has enough detail there so that we can hit, collide, accumulate, and pour. Let's go ahead and turn that off. Go back to frame 6, where we were. There we go. All right. So now going into the flip fluid object, we can lower this just a touch, and then I'm going to want to go into the physical tab, and I want to take this viscosity and I want to turn it on. Let's set it to a value of 100. All right, so then from this viscosity, we won't need to really mess with anything else in here. We'll go down to the flip solver itself. And then now within here, I had the timescale set to 2, min substeps 2, and then 4. And then in the particle motion, this is where, again, remember, we want to add the age particles, and we'll throw on the vorticity, just because sometimes we end up using this to shade, sometimes we don't. And really, that's sort of it for now. Let's just set this guy off. Let's see what we get. All right. So first things first, we don't need this container to be so large. So let's go back to frame 1 and let's pull this in a bit. Just so that we don't end up calculating in areas that we're not going to need. All right. But one thing I noticed is that in order for our viscosity to work, we have to turn on enable viscosity by attribute. And now, when we start to pour, we should have a different result. A little bit less splashy like water and a little bit more like honey. Okay, cool. So this is what we're looking for. All right. Zoom in on this guy. Cool. All right, so for this simulation, I'm going to want to just sim or just stream for about 9 frames. So let me set this to manual real quick, and then we'll hop over to frame 9, set a key, move forward to frame 10, and set a key, oops, come back. All right, So now what's going to happen is our stream will stop running at frame 10, and then it will continue to flow down, and then that's what we're going to use for our simulation. So just let that ride. There you go. And then now you'll see as that guy starts to pour, it's going to give us some interesting shapes that then we can use our point VOPs and noise on top of, and it can give us some pretty cool alternate looks. Okay. So now I want to go in, and then let's start just decreasing this so that we start to get a larger particle count. Because ultimately we're going to want to sim with as many particles as our system can handle. But yeah, so you can see we'll have a good pour going here. I think I'll probably end up simming about maybe 30 frames of this in order to give us that, you know, amount of variety in terms of the shape for when we do that point accumulation down the road, like we did in the last section. And you'll see here just, you know, letting this stuff pour, giving us some interesting looks. And then once we apply noise on top of this, then we're going to start getting into some pretty interesting territory. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower this particle separation down to a value of probably 0.00. Let's go 0.008. And then I'm going to cache this out, and then we'll meet you back for the read back in, and when we start setting up that whole setup using the time shifts and the color nodes. So let me cache this out, and I'll come right back. Okay, so here we are after we've cached out those particles. We're going to end up using about frame 5 to 15 in the simulation. And you'll see here I've broken everything out similar to the way that we just did in the last scene. And in the final scene file that you guys get, you'll see things like this where I've annotated basically everything along the way. So you'll see things like, you know, read in your particles here. This is your file cache. And then down the road, here's your time shift where you want to break out a chain for, you know, a setup for each frame of the simulation to help us with the accumulation. Now this time around for this look, I doubled up the point VOPs to really sort of break up and give different looks to the simulation. But again, you don't have to do this. This is just what I did for this final version. And then again, each one gets their own color ramp. Now you'll notice again here, now in addition to playing with the range values that we did in the last section, now I started also playing with the ramps themselves in the color. Actually, this is an old node. Don't need that one there. But so yeah, so from here to here, you see the color variation. The color starts to change. And this is again where we're going to get different looks. Okay, so the setup, you know, ends up being the same. Is you read in your cache, you break out a time shift chain for each cache, and then in that chain, I've thrown down point VOPs to manipulate the particles to give me different looks. So why don't I just go ahead and take a look at one of these chains. Give that a moment to cache. Okay, so here you can see, here's one chain. And so this ends up being frame 11. Now let's look at a different frame. Actually, turn that flag off. How about frame 8? All right, there we go. Now you can see, definitely have a different look. Boop. We definitely have a different look in terms of color and shape. And again, as we just go down the chain, each of these will have a different look, slightly different color variation, and then that's where you can get all that really nice accumulation of in color and internal density and complexity, and things are just going to look really cool. Okay, so you start to see some really neat patterns arising. Again, always going with sort of like a radiated heat color gradient, because these things are gaseous explosions and they're violent spatial anomalies. It's just a lot of crazy stuff going on out there, and they all have different heat signatures, and those heat signatures refract light differently, and that's where you get all that interesting stuff. So again, let's look at another one just for sake of argument. Okay, so here's another one. Now we started to get a little bigger in scale, different color variation. So this is how you get all that detail, and it's, you know, it's extremely simple. It's very, very simple, repeatable, and as long as you can manage your RAM on your machine, you can do just the infinite amount of variation, color variation, shape variation. It's really exciting and it's a fun thing to do. So let's go down here, and you'll see again our point wrangle, where we're introducing our p-scale and our density, and then ultimately our volume rasterized attributes, where we've pumped everything in, and then we turn this particle cloud into a volume. But then just for fun, and we'll see if it doesn't cause my machine to explode, I am going to throw the flag onto this merge node, and so we can look at all of the points before it runs into the volume rasterization. So I'm going to click this, and then I'm going to go for a walk around the block. Be back in just a second. Okay, so here we are with everything accumulated on itself. And you can see there's a lot of variation of color in there, swirling around, mixing around. And a lot of that is going to come through as well once this point scale gets to be thinner. We'll be able to really get inside this thing and see all the different color that there is accumulated. Okay, so let's do that now. Run it through the point wrangle, and then through the volume rasterized attributes, and then eventually we end up down here, and we can take a look at this volume visualization. All right, here we go. So now we can see that guy. Once rasterized, it really kind of pulls out some of that internal color. And we've got a really nice point cloud to work through. All right, and so this is where its ultimate placement is going to be in the render after putting this transform. And so in our shot cam, layout wise, this is where we're going to end up with that guy. All right, so now that we have most of our pieces created in terms of we've rasterized all our particles, all of our point clouds. Now it's just about laying them out and then throwing in some lights and then, you know, tweaking the shaders, and we're good to go out the door. So let's go into that now. Let's just finalize our placement, throw down some lights, and go from there.